So, I will not introduce Holly because I already did. But what I will do is introduce Julia Ruther, who is my co-conspirator at the foundation in all things collective giving. I will say that I know that collective giving works for everybody because you could not pick two more opposite people in all ways, shapes, or forms. Everything I think is a great idea, she's like, hold on, let's talk that through. Everything she thinks is a great idea, I'm like, wait, why are we doing that again? But we always come to agreement on all the pieces. The other night, she said, we are like the left and right hand. I immediately was like, I'm the left hand, and I don't know why I felt like I needed to announce that.
That's fine. You can be the left hand.
But truly, it has been an honor to work with Julia. What I will say quickly is that Julia and I literally were in a giving circle together, and that's how we met. And we look at each other numerous times through our work and say, we're getting paid to do the work that we did as volunteers, and we still love it to this day. So thank you so much, Julia.
Oh, thank you. I am so excited to talk with Holly about this amazing book that you guys all now get to walk out of here with and spend time with. Sarah and I have been talking about sort of the different ways we've been reading it. Sarah's been listening to it. I love that I can like open it up and just start reading wherever I start. But before we talk about the book, a lot of this program has been about modeling the experience of being a part of something, right? Being a part of this collective giving movement. And like Bo said, this is a whole person work. So I'm going to start with the question from one of your giving circles in the book, which is, how is your sleep?
Oh my God, Julia, it is so messed up. I don't know if any of you here are in perimenopause or menopause, so the sleep is not my friend. But I've had to say goodbye to red wine. But I'm really enjoying this pina colada Mississippi style in August, so thank you for that.
Cheers to that. Well, the setup of the book is that the big we is bottom-up philanthropy. And the big fill is top down, right? You so brilliantly define the big fill. Like, we've been looking for the term, and you nailed it. And I'm actually going to read your definition because it's so good. For shorthand in this book, I will call this big dollar, billionaire-powered, donor is sun king, individualistic, strategic, technocratic form of philanthropy, Big Phil. And you also say, and this is something that really, as somebody who's been working as a professional in philanthropy for 4 years, was in a giving circle before that, was fundraising and doing nonprofit work, you talk about how Big Phil and the big we, like, they run in parallel, right? But the big we has been doing this work so much longer, right? Millennia longer. And the big Phil is kind of new, heavy in the game, and maybe is gonna have a short run. So I wonder how, as someone working in philanthropy, how you have kind of embraced this both and approach, doing movement work that's really kind of critical, saying like, let's do this different of Big Phil, while also working like with the Gates Foundation, who is like the biggest, Philliest Big Phil of them all, right? So how do you navigate the tension?
Well, that's a great question, Julia. And like I said a few minutes ago, I navigate it every day, not always well. Can you just hold up your book for a second? Because I took a picture of this for my mom. All the Post-it notes. I'm really touched by that anyone's reading my book who's not my mom is very touching to me, and thank you for buying books, Sarah. So I don't know if any of you guys know Farhad Ibrahimi. He's kind of a philosopher in our sector. He works at Solidar Network, and he's a cool guy. He talks about philanthropy as a transitional form. And what he's talking about is that we have this wealth disparity in our country. It's actually more extreme now than it was when philanthropy was begun as a professional field and sector. So for history buffs in the room, our sector of philanthropy was born during the first Gilded Age in American history, when the Carnegies and the Rockefellers and the Fords and people like robber barons were making great fortunes in steel and wood chopping and industry and railroads. And they gave birth and created these foundations that live in perpetuity, many of them eponymous foundations that exist today. The wealth distribution that we're experiencing in this country now, we're living through a second Gilded Age in American history with great fortunes being made in tech and finance. And the wealth disparity now is even worse than the first time around. And to illustrate that in your head for just a brief second, put into your head the picture of Trump being inaugurated the second time around. The three men behind him on the dais were Zuckerberg, Bezos, and Musk. Those three men own and control as much wealth as 50% of Americans. So those three men own and control as much wealth as 170 million of the rest of us. We've never had wealth disparity like that in this country. In my mind, my opinion, it's gross. It's morally, honestly, kind of repugnant, and it's not very democratic. So that's the context in which we all live and work right now. Also keep in mind that when we think about the dollars moved in philanthropy, the number of dollars moved in our sector of philanthropy and social change are just tiny compared to the dollars moved by capital markets, investment dollars, the stock market, and also puny as compared to US tax dollars. And if you also keep in mind what I said at the end of our last conversation, that those of us who are involved in this work, we're individuals who do all the things. We vote, we knock on doors, we volunteer, we donate money, we do all of the things. We can influence and make our voices and passions and values known within these other realms, philanthropy being one of them. So what Farhad's talking about when he says that philanthropy is a transitional form is that put philanthropy in context of capital markets and our power as voters, civic engagement, which I think we'll get to towards the end of this conversation. And those of us who have access and the ability to work with wealthy people in wealthy communities, with fund holders at places like this, have sort of an obligation to do what we can, given the context that I just described, while always keeping an eye and a hope and our other parts of our lives active in these other realms that actually wield a lot more power and a lot more dollars than our philanthropic sector. So that's the tension that I think we have to navigate in this work, and not that I can solve it in this moment or with one book, but I think a lot of us, including trust-based philanthropy and our friends across the sector, are trying.
Absolutely. Can you just talk for a moment about the Freedom School curriculum and its role in that sort of maybe making the streams come together so that the big we comes out, right?
Yeah, so my team at Radiant has been building this philanthropy curriculum called Freedom School for Philanthropy for the last 3 or 4 years. We've done 12 cohorts with wealthy people and also with people who work with wealthy people. And it follows a me to we to big we arc, just like my book. And it's not a coincidence that I was writing this book at the same time that 3 of us were writing this curriculum. And the social change table that I described in the last conversation comes from Freedom School for Philanthropy. You know, none of us, it's the title of our gathering today, none of us can make the change we want and want to see alone. The way we're going to do it is together. Most donor education curricula in America, and sad to say, philanthropy as a professional sector is an American export because our field as a professional field was born in this country at the time of the first golden age of making money, I guess, Gilded Age. So we're exporting this, among other things that we're exporting to other countries that are trying to build philanthropic cultures. So some of us are really trying hard to say, well, don't do all the mistakes that we've done, skip some of these parts in Singapore or South Africa or other places that are interested. We're trying, but just kind of like how some giving circles recreate the thing that we think we're supposed to do, it's hard to change the culture that we've been kind of given, What was the question again, Julia?
I think it's just, I wanted to highlight the curriculum.
Freedom School.
Freedom School, which you can read more about in the
and
book.
I can share more, and it's in the book, but most donor education curricula in America start and end with the donor. And from what Julia read, in America, in philanthropy, the wealthy donor is literally like Louis XIV. He's the sun god around which all the rest of us in the social change sector orbit. And it was created that way by design. And I think that it's obviously flawed. That serves a certain person. In the donors of color work that I got to build also, one of the things we learned and shared and tried to sort of fight is this idea that philanthropy is about wealthy white men in this country. The story of philanthropy in this country has been told as a wealthy white man's story. Sometimes it's been told as a wealthy white dead man's story, who is literally directing their largesse and their wishes from the grave. So part of the donors of color research and build was really saying, hey, there's some other people who've been doing this stuff for a lot longer than the Gilded Age of American culture, and those people don't look like that. And then, hey, with giving circles and collective giving and Ty, where Ty works, it's another group of us, and Sarah, in your work, hey, there's a bunch of people who've been doing this work as groups in community, and these are important stories that need to be told to tell fully and more fulsomely the story of philanthropy in the United States. And I also, sorry, now I'm fully taking the train. I think that the foundation here, and you guys are also starting at the St. Paul and Minnesota foundations, is really doing cool work. I've done like 80 book talks around the country this year. My book came out a year and a little bit ago. And this foundation is really exemplary, like really living and breathing what it means to democratize philanthropy. So
we are doing that.
Kudos to you.
Yes,
And what does it look like? And changing culture is really hard. And changing the subject of philanthropy away from the donor as the sun king and more towards the communities that we love and values at the heart of it, that should be the sun around which all of us orbit, not some person who made a lot of money who happens to be old and dead.
Absolutely, thank you for that. I do, it's why I asked the question about the friction, is because I think I don't know anybody working in philanthropy right now, certainly not at the Minneapolis Foundation, who isn't in that friction, right? Saying we're at a 110-year-old community foundation and we're also trying to do this movement work, right? Which this is grassroots generosity movement work, but it's also narrative change work. It's also culture change work, which is hard, really but hard. Also so joyful. And something to celebrate, which is why we got all you guys together, right? Is because
way more fun.
It's way more
if
fun.
we do it together.
Exactly.
With food.
Move the money really fast. Trust the work is going to be done better than even you expect, and just move the money, right? So I want to talk about the big we both, right? We're here to talk about the book, but also the concept. You have this beautiful close to your book and kind of pose this question that I think your next book is speaking to, which is, how do we build the big we, this long haul systems change? What are some kind of commitments or actions that you're taking, or you would encourage the folks in the room to take to do that building work?
I'm writing a second book, and it's kind of a how to do.
Pre-order it now.
Yeah, well, not quite. I'll let you know, but it's kind of how to do the ideas that are in this book. And as you guys know, none of it is rocket science. None of the actions that are involved in building a bigger we are actually that hard to do. But the thing that is hard to do is that millions of us have to do it. That millions of us have to honestly give a shit and get educated and link arms with one another and do it together. That's the hard part. So the book that I'm writing next is, I'm fighting with my publisher about the title a little bit, but I think we're going to lean into neighborhoods, like neighbors as a fundamental unit of a democracy. And the subtitle is 5 Things You Can Do Right Now to Be a Better Citizen Today. 5 things that we can all do right now, tomorrow, this week, to be a better citizen today. And thing 1 is literally invite 5 neighbors over for dinner, sort of riffing on the kitchen table metaphor that runs through my book. And there's so much happening right now that is talking about neighbors. And you guys led the way in this city. Thank God, I'm sorry, but also thank God it was you when Metro Surge happened. I live in Brooklyn, and it would not have gone as well, I don't think. It's happening in Brooklyn too. ICE was just in Bushwick, and it's happening. So what are we going to do about it? So my block association right now is really concerned about rats and trees, literally rats. Like one ran over my foot when I was walking my dog the other day, and I could feel its little nails through the mesh of my sneaker. And after COVID, or during, all these sidewalk restaurants came up, rats are a big problem. And my block has these beautiful trees, and sometimes the limbs fall down. So we're really obsessed with rats and trees. So we're starting a Google sheet about like who on the block is good at random stuff, like tree beautification, who's sick at home and might need a little bit of help. It's a little bit of like, can we set up a little mutual aid network just on my block? And it's sort of fun and sometimes a little silly. Like, I'm a beekeeper, my husband makes sourdough, but maybe you're an EMT. Like, there's some stuff in there that is actually kind of more relevant. So, but the idea of inviting neighbors over, the reason why it's thing 1 in my new book is that those same elements that are required to throw a party on my block are the same elements that we're going to need to know about one another if there's a Metro Surge that happens in Fort Greene, Brooklyn. We're going to need to know who is stuck at home. We're going to need to know who's got kids that need to go to school or groceries that need to get gotten that someone can't go out and do. We need to know who's the EMT, who's the one who knows how to garden, who's the one. These are the same things that we need to know in order to build relationships and also to help one another when things get really bad. And that's why I said earlier, relationships are infrastructure. Thing 2 is, I forgot actually, thing 2. Thing 3 is practice courage, practice a little bit of bravery. Thing 2 is you've got to wade into the political sphere. In America, change is contested in politics to a large degree. That's the thing that's most scary to people when I talk about this book. But it's easier to do scary things if you do them together, arm in arm with your friends and neighbors and book club mates or soccer league friends. And thing 5, wait, 1, 2, I don't remember.
I think we're on 4.
We're on 4. I forgot what that one is. But thing 5 is like, put yourself in front of awe. And for me, it's art or being a fan. Like in New York recently, we had Nixon 5. It was incredible on my block. The street literally erupted. The last time that happened was when Obama won the first time, and my neighbors, we all just spilled onto the streets, and it was just a spontaneous block party. Got a little drunken. It was so much fun. And the Knicks winning was kind of the same feeling. And then we went right into the World Cup with restaurants from all different countries just putting up signs and hosting block parties. The vibes were incredible. And then we have this great new mayor who's like jumping into swimming pools in his suit and showing us what we can all buy for $50 in New York City because he did this lottery for World Cup tickets. These are things that put me as a human, as a neighbor, as a citizen of Brooklyn and New York City, in touch with something much bigger than me. And it's also fun, and it's also going to keep me coming back for more.
I love that. And can we just take a moment for all of the neighbors and mutual aid folks in the room? I know Kate, Katie, Claire, I know so many of you guys were a part of that during Operation Metro Surge. So neighborhood, neighboring, anything, it's great.
Yes.
But keep doing it,
And
right?
have you listened to Jelani Cobb on this? Jelani Cobb is the dean of the Columbia School of Journalism, and he was on a podcast recently where he talked about neighboring, and he brought you guys up. And the important point that he made, he connected what happened in Minneapolis to what happened during the slave patrol days in 1850s in Boston, when 2,000 Bostonians came out to protect a neighbor who had escaped slavery a black man who had escaped slavery from the South. And there was a federal law at that time that made it illegal to help an escaped person stay free. Does that sound familiar to what we're dealing with right now? 2,000 Bostonians came out to prevent that man from being sent back to God knows what future, with God knows what safeguards, with God knows what lack of due process. Jelani Cobb makes the comparison to what happened here during Metro Surge, and he says that if you polled the 2,000 Bostonians in 1850, they probably had 2,000 different opinions on property, slavery, the rights of people who were property, who had escaped the place where they were property. If you ask 2,000 people here their views on what would make someone an alien or an illegal, or here illegally or legally, or what does it mean to be a citizen or birthright, you would find a vast range of opinions and political opinions about both of those groups of people, 1850s Boston and 2025 Minneapolis. But what united people in both of those times and places across differences of class and race and life experiences, what united them was, you're not going to take my neighbor. You may not remove this person who has been part of my community for a year or 3 years or 5 years. You may not take them from my block or neighborhood. And that's a very powerful and hopeful sentiment that I think we can build on, and that you guys really showed the rest of this country what we can do.
So for our last question, because we are already up on time, I know, and this mirrors a question that you all can answer in the room over in the activation station over there. But, I love this. You called yourself a hopeaholic, and that really resonated with me. And I feel like I'm in this, relationship with hope, right? Where I have different feelings at different times depending on how a question is posed to me. And so, I get kind of prickly when somebody's like, what gives you hope? And I'm like, ugh. But I've been sitting with this better feeling, and maybe this will give you all friction, but what do you hope for community?
I'll send it right back to you. Well, I have two quick stories that I'll share that really honestly do give me hope. And they're giving circle stories. So you guys know...
and we have 1 minute.
Okay. 17-year-old in Arizona started a giving circle with her friends in high school. The starting ante to put into the pot, the cost of your favorite drink at Starbucks. So times the price of a chai latte times many, many kids. This group of kids raised $13,000 with their school and a few others, and made grants to a pet shelter and an after-school child program. They went through a democratic process to raise the money, find the orgs, vet the orgs, and give the money away. So that gives me a ton of hope because they're the future. My mother-in-law is 97, and she lives in rural Connecticut. When she was a spry 90, she discovered that there was the chance to flip a state legislative seat in her corner of rural Connecticut. She called the campaign office, and it was flipping from an old boys network, white guy Republican, and the younger woman challenger is a Democrat, and she supports the Democratic Party. So she called the campaign office and said, what can I, as a 90 slightly older lady, do to help make this change happen? They came up with this idea that she could host a weekly tea party at her kitchen table every week for the summer before the November election. Her table seats 8, so if there's a spot for Aka, we call her Aka, and a spot for Maria, the candidate, that leaves 6 people around the table to come meet the candidate. So she did that. 12 weeks, 12 tea parties, 72 people came to meet the candidate. The election happened in November. It was so close, it went to a runoff. The challenger won by 57 votes. everyone agreed that ACA's tea parties made a material difference in flipping that seat. And Maria's gone on to hold that seat for 2 more cycles. So people, friends, neighbors, lovers, if a 17-year-old can do it in Arizona and a 90-year-old really nice white lady can do it in rural Connecticut, then certainly you and I can.
Yes, thank you. Thanks, everyone.